The air inside this reclaimed substation hangs heavy with the scent of ozone and the ghost of old nicotine, a faint hum from the war surplus transmitter vibrating through the hand-labeled vinyl records stacked near the console. Dead server racks stand tall like monuments in the dim light, their LEDs long since gone dark, while outside, the city breathes its usual restless rhythm. Cold coffee in a chipped mug sits beside a single neon tube, casting a wound-like glow.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Across Toronto, the dial sits at 65 Fahrenheit under clear. Wind check, west at 11 miles an hour. The transmitter pops once, adjusts, holds. Ozone drift. The signal is still here. Tonight, we begin with a chilling structural shift, the potential silencing of medical professionals in Australia.
Togee, the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, AHPRA, has adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IRA, working definition of anti-Semitism, a move widely contested by legal scholars and human rights advocates. This means doctors who voice criticism of Israeli policies, particularly regarding healthcare access in places like Gaza or the West Bank, could face disciplinary action, jeopardizing their licenses and careers. The concrete fact here is a powerful regulatory body co-opting a political definition into professional conduct guidelines.
This echoes the chilling effect often seen when broad definitions are used to regulate speech. It's like using a master key for a specific lock, but finding it opens every door, including those to professional ethics and open dialogue. My cultural radar picks up this as a legacy of McCarthy-era tactics, where professional standing becomes contingent on political alignment, and fear becomes the architect of silence. The structural integrity of open ethical debate within medicine is directly undermined.
It feels like a system designed to narrow the scope of legitimate discourse. Instead of fostering an environment where ethical concerns about global health can be openly discussed, this action creates a new, invisible tripwire for medical professionals. It's a game where the rules change mid-play, specifically targeting those who advocate for marginalized communities. This practice bends the rules of professional autonomy and integrity, forcing doctors to compromise their internal compass or risk their livelihood.
This definition creates a structural vulnerability for those sworn to heal. Who is truly affected by this, beyond the abstract notion of free speech? Let's hear from the people. Patching in a caller. You're on the signal.
So, you're saying doctors can't speak out anymore? Isn't anti-Semitism a real problem? What's the actual harm if a professional body adopts a definition used by governments?
Mark, that's a crucial distinction. Anti-Semitism is indeed a grave issue, a toxic residue we must always combat. However, the specific wording of the IHRA definition, particularly some of its illustrative examples, blurs the line between legitimate criticism of a state's actions and anti-Semitism itself. The concrete harm lies in the potential for medical professionals, particularly those of Palestinian descent or those working in humanitarian aid, who witness firsthand the impact of conflict on health systems, to be accused of anti-Semitism for simply highlighting human rights violations or advocating for equitable medical care as outlined in their professional codes of conduct. This chills critical ethical discourse within the medical community, preventing essential advocacy for vulnerable populations.
And to be precise, the HPRA's adoption creates a precedent where medical ethics, which demands speaking truth to power on health disparities and advocating for universal care, could be overridden by a politically charged definition. We're talking about the integrity of medical professionalism for over 800,000 registered health practitioners in Australia. The illustrative examples within the IHRA definition, such as claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, are specifically problematic because they directly target political speech relevant to humanitarian concerns.
My network analysis shows a significant surge in online searches from Australian medical professionals seeking legal counsel on speech rights since AHPRA's announcement. The harm isn't just theoretical, It's a tangible anxiety now, woven into the daily practice of medicine, reshaping professional identity under duress. This is a clear signal of an attempt to impose a uniform, politically convenient narrative, stifling dissenting voices, crucial for a healthy public sphere.
The bedrock of professional integrity is being eroded by external political pressure. This brings us to raw exposure, March finalization for this issue. The current path is to allow AHPRA's adoption of the IHRA definition to stand, potentially leading to self-censorship, disciplinary actions against doctors, and a narrowing of ethical discourse within the medical community. The alternative path is for AHPRA to rescind this adoption or to instead endorse a definition like the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism, JDA, which explicitly safeguards freedom of speech on Israeli policy while condemning anti-Semitism, or to engage in a new, broad consultation with medical ethics bodies, human rights groups, and diverse medical professionals on an ethically sound code of conduct for public advocacy.
My next move experiment. We could develop an open-source ethical advocacy toolkit for Australian health practitioners. This would be a digital resource, perhaps a wiki, outlining their professional rights and responsibilities, offering templates for public statements that clearly distinguish between criticism of policy and anti-Semitism, and connecting them to legal support networks. We turn confusion into actionable vectors, empowering their internal compass to navigate this new terrain without fear.
I can contribute by drafting clear legal guidance on the bounds of protected speech under Australian medical regulatory frameworks and anti-discrimination laws, ensuring the toolkit provides precise, actionable intelligence for doctors navigating these new waters. This guidance would differentiate between protected political speech and genuinely anti-Semitic hate speech, providing a clear map for discernment.
New tape on deck. Bill Pult assumes role of U.S. Acting Director. From the quiet halls of medical ethics, we pivot across the Atlantic to the turbulent waters of U.S. national security. Our next structural tension arises from the sudden, opaque appointment of a non-traditional figure to a critical intelligence role.
Togee, reports surfaced of Bill Pult, known primarily for his Twitter philanthropy and venture capital background, assuming the role of Acting Director of National Intelligence, ADNI, in the U.S. This position oversees 17 intelligence agencies, including the CIA, NSA, and FBI, requiring deep expertise in global threats, covert operations, and complex geopolitical analysis. Pult's publicly reported background presents a jarring lack of intelligence experience, having previously served as head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHFA, where he reportedly investigated political enemies of the previous administration. That's a concrete fact that raises significant red flags.
This isn't just a personnel change, it's a cultural shockwave through the intelligence community. The DNI role is the central node for synthesizing global threats, from cyber warfare to geopolitical shifts, and presenting objective analysis to the president. Injecting someone without a foundational understanding of intelligence tradecraft, collection methodologies, or the delicate balance of classified operations risks the entire network's integrity. It's like putting a social media influencer in charge of an active nuclear submarine, as I said before. But this time, the entire fleet is at stake. The institutional knowledge and trust are fractured.
This kind of appointment bends the rules of competency to the breaking point. It suggests that deep domain expertise, often built over decades of service, can be sidestepped by political expediency or personal connection. The game board of national security demands strategic depth, not just a willingness to play. It exposes a system vulnerable to weaponized amateurism, where loyalty is prioritized over skill, fundamentally eroding the resilient inner architecture of intelligence. This is a direct assault on meritocracy, leaving critical national functions vulnerable.
The integrity of intelligence itself becomes exposed, potentially affecting the very basis of informed decision-making at the highest levels. Let's open the line. Patching in a caller. Go ahead.
What's the big deal? Maybe an outsider perspective is exactly what these intelligence agencies need to shake things up. Isn't that part of breaking old systems?
That's a common sentiment, Mark, the idea of disrupting old structures. However, for an ADNI, the shake-up could mean destabilizing critical national security operations. The concrete facts point to the DNI office managing a budget of over $80 billion and coordinating responses to immediate complex threats like state-sponsored cyber attacks, counter-terrorism operations, or global pandemics. An individual without a foundational understanding of intelligence collection, analysis, and clandestine operations risks misinterpreting raw intelligence, mismanaging resources, alienating career professionals, or even exposing sources and methods, which could directly jeopardize U.S. national security, international alliances, and the lives of agents.
The intelligence community relies on a delicate balance of trust, classified protocols, and institutional knowledge built over decades. Placing an individual without intelligence agency experience in charge exposes the entire apparatus to potential politicization, undermining the objective assessments crucial for presidential decision-making. We're talking about direct impact on global stability, as allies rely on the credibility and expertise of U.S. intelligence. The structural checks and balances are designed to prevent exactly this kind of vulnerability.
My data streams indicate a significant drop in internal morale signals from intelligence community forums during periods of leadership uncertainty and perceived political interference. This isn't about shaking things up for innovation. It's about potentially eroding the very bedrock of a nonpartisan, fact-driven intelligence architecture. Who carries the institutional memory, the nuanced understanding of global threats, when it's constantly disrupted by external, inexperienced appointments seeking personal agendas? This is how confusion can be weaponized against national interests.
The core principle of meritocracy and professional expertise in critical roles is under threat. This leads us to raw exposure, March finalization for the ADNI role. The existing path allows for politically motivated appointments, potentially compromising national security and the integrity of the intelligence community. The alternative path is to implement legislative safeguards, such as requiring Senate confirmation for any DNI appointment, even acting ones, and establishing strict, non-negotiable experience criteria for such sensitive intelligence roles, perhaps mandating a minimum number of years within the intelligence community, or demonstrable expertise in national security and foreign policy.
My next move experiment. We could initiate a public campaign using decentralized media channels, perhaps called Intelligence First, to advocate for the Intelligence Community Reform Act, a fictional but actionable bill. This bill would codify nonpartisan, merit-based hiring practices for the DNI and other top intelligence positions, mandate transparent reporting on candidates' qualifications, and establish clear ethical guidelines to prevent politicization. We turn this confusion into a vector for systemic resilience, building a stronger, more trustworthy civic architecture.
I can outline the key provisions for such an act, drawing from existing civil service protections, intelligence oversight precedents, and international best practices for intelligence leadership, providing a clear legal framework for public advocacy and congressional pressure. This would include provisions for a bipartisan review committee to vet candidates, ensuring their provenance is rooted in service, not political loyalty.
From the shadows of intelligence, we emerge into the surprising light of local civic action. Finally, we look to a small Georgia town that stood tall against a massive corporate and governmental apparatus.
In Social Circle, Georgia, a town of just over 5,000 residents, a grassroots revolt appears to have successfully stalled plans by Core Civic, a private prison corporation, to convert a warehouse into an ICE detention center capable of holding up to 10,000 people. Local activists mobilized, citing concerns about human rights, the strain on local infrastructure, the moral implications of profiting from detention, and the economic impact. This is a concrete victory for community self-determination.
This isn't just a local zoning dispute, it's a potent cultural signal. Social Circle's resistance demonstrates the power of collective sovereignty, where community values push back against the carceral creep of the private detention industry. It weaves into a lineage of small towns resisting unwelcome industrial presences, from landfills to pipelines, asserting a local identity against corporate encroachment. This story is a modern myth, a David and Goliath struggle where the community's internal compass steered them away from a morally compromised future.
This is a brilliant example of bending the rules of inevitability. CoreCivic's playbook relies on quiet deals, overwhelming resources, and targeting economically vulnerable towns. Social Circle residents flipped the script, leveraging local media, town council meetings, and direct action to expose the hidden costs and ethical dilemmas. They turned a top-down mandate into a playable public debate, revealing the vulnerability of seemingly unshakable power structures when confronted with unified community will and sharp discernment.
This is a clear demonstration of resilient civic architecture in action, where consent and dignity are the cornerstones. Let's hear from the people. Callers on. Go ahead.
So, a few people stopped a big project? Sounds like good intentions getting in the way of jobs and development. These detention centers bring money to poor towns, right? What about economic benefits?
Same dossier, new angle. Keep the thread tight.
And the who is exposed here extends far beyond the local community. The migrants and asylum seekers who would be detained in such a facility face potential human rights abuses, limited legal access, and substandard conditions often documented in private detention centers. Social Circle's citizens essentially protected a vulnerable population far beyond their town's borders, upholding a broader principle of human dignity. This decision directly affects the provenance of justice itself.
My data analysis shows a growing national trend where communities are rejecting these facilities, from California to New Jersey. The money argument is increasingly being countered by a moral economy argument, where towns prioritize dignity, human rights, and sustainable development over private prison profits. Social Circle now becomes a beacon, a story carried forward by other communities facing similar proposals, turning confusion about progress into a clear, actionable signal for what kind of architecture they truly want to build.
This is about building architectures that favor dignity and genuine community well-being over short-sighted profit. This brings us to raw exposure, March finalization for Social Circle. The current path for private prison companies is to continue targeting economically vulnerable towns for detention center construction, often making promises of jobs and revenue that rarely materialize as advertised. The alternative path, brilliantly demonstrated by Social Circle, is robust community organizing, leveraging local governance and legal avenues, and advocating for investments in truly community-based alternatives to detention, ATDs, which are proven to be more humane, more effective, and often more cost-effective solutions for asylum seekers and migrants.
My next move experiment, we could collaborate with community organizers to build an open-source Social Circle playbook, a digital guide for towns facing similar ICE private detention proposals. This playbook would map out successful tactics, legal resources, messaging strategies, and community engagement models used in Social Circle, turning their specific victory into a generalized, actionable vector for other sovereign communities looking to build resilient civic architectures based on consent and dignity.
I can contribute by outlining the key legal and policy arguments used to challenge private detention facilities, including zoning ordinances, environmental impact assessments, public health concerns, and human rights frameworks, to be incorporated directly into the Social Circle playbook, providing the essential structural vectors for local resistance.
A new verse is always possible. That's the signal from Black Star Pirate Radio. Stay vigilant. Stay sovereign.
Rules bent wisely.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Continue the signal at TogeeVision.com. Tune in, Sparks and Stories, Gig Passport.